Warning: this video contains mentions of suicide. If you or someone you know is struggling with suicidal thoughts, please seek help. On the screen, you'll find resources available for support. Pause the video if you need to, and remember that this information is also included in the video description. This video aims to raise awareness about a hidden danger associated with narcissistic personality disorder. Dealing with a narcissist can be an incredibly dreadful experience, sometimes leading to suicidal behavior. However, no matter how dark or hopeless life may feel right now, there is always a better way out. Even in the most agonizing moments, remember that a brighter future is possible. Suicide is not the answer. There is hope, and a life worth living is within reach.
Hello, everyone. Today I am sharing the darkest chapter of my life, a story that still haunts me and keeps me in therapy even now. 5 years ago, I fell head over heels for a woman. We shared incredible moments, both joyous and challenging. But even during our happiest times, I could not shake the feeling that something was off. It was as if a higher power was warning me. She was not who I thought she was. This unease foreshadowed the storm that would hit in the final months of our relationship. And that is where our story begins. It all started one night when I went to spend some quality time with my girlfriend. Usually she would be thrilled to see me, her face lighting up as I walked into the bedroom. She would always be perched on the edge of the bed, either watching TV or playing video games. But that night was different. She was already in bed, glued to her phone, and did not seem to care that I was there. A sinking feeling settled in my gut, warning me that something terrible was coming. I hoped I was wrong, but it soon became clear. This was the beginning of the end. Her behavior that night reminded me of when she cheated on me a few years before. The way she acted now was eerily like how she behaved during her infidelity. Panic set in as I feared history was repeating itself. To give you some context, we broke up for a day back then. I understood that people make mistakes, and I chose to forgive her. After all, I had my share of regrets and had learned to forgive myself. So I believed she deserved another chance, convinced she would never make the same mistake again. Now the panic inside me was overwhelming, and I knew I needed to talk to her. I confronted her about her behavior, making sure to approach the conversation sincerely. She assured me that she still loved me, regretted the infidelity, and would never repeat that mistake. While she seemed understanding, I could not shake the feeling deep down that she was not being honest with me. Gradually, the closeness and intimacy we once had begun to fade, becoming superficial. I hoped things would improve by Friday, a day I had arranged to have off work every other week just to spend more time with her. I made this arrangement only a month prior because she felt we were not spending enough time together, and I genuinely wanted to be a good boyfriend. I cherished those Fridays, as I was deeply in love with her, and I remember how excited she used to be for our time together. But this time she did not seem to care at all. When that Friday finally came, the excitement I once saw in her was gone. Instead of going on a date or spending quality time together, she had me run errands with her. The day ended up revolving entirely around her needs. By the end of it, I was deeply hurt and told her it felt like she was falling out of love with me and taking advantage of my efforts. She reassured me that she still loved me and wasn't taking advantage, but I sensed she was not being truthful. Her apology did not feel genuine at all. While I was pouring out my feelings, she kept her attention on her phone. When she finally did apologize, it was as if she wasn't really listening. She just said, "I'm sorry. I will do better next time," in a dismissive manner, clearly eager to end the conversation and return her focus to her phone. Shortly after, I saw her laughing and looking at her phone, twirling her hair with googly eyes. The last time I saw her twirling her hair like that was when she was around the guy she cheated on me with. My PTSD from that incident resurfaced for the first time in a long while. I confronted her, keeping my voice calm. I told her that seeing her twirl her hair like that brought back haunting memories of her infidelity. In the past, whenever my PTSD from infidelity was triggered, she was always understanding and provided the emotional support I needed to calm my anxiety. I also worked with a therapist to overcome the trauma, and for a long time I believed I was over it. So when I told her that her twirling her hair had triggered my anxiety again, I expected her to understand. Instead, she got angry and yelled, "I can't believe that a simple act such as twirling my hair would trigger you." I cracked under the pressure and said, "Go to hell," before walking away, stunned by her insensitivity to my feelings. Later, she apologized for her heartless outburst, and I apologized for my sullen comment, genuinely feeling bad about what I had said. While my apology was sincere, hers still felt hollow and unconvincing. I felt guilty about reacting negatively to her distancing herself from me, especially since it started when she began seeing an EMDR therapist to deal with past trauma she experienced before we met. She claimed being around me made her uncomfortable because it forced her to confront those painful memories. Yet, deep in my gut, I sensed she was hiding something from me. Whenever I talked to her about how her emotional distance was hurting me, she would give me a chilling look. Her eyes would go blank, and her face would take on an almost demonic expression. She would say, "I am having to neglect my own needs to satisfy yours." Looking back, I realized this was psychological projection. In reality, I was the one neglecting my own essential need for feeling loved by my partner, in order to try to make her happy. In response to her dealing with past trauma, I decided to have flowers delivered to her. I was the kind of boyfriend who loved to surprise her with flowers because I enjoyed seeing how happy they made her. This time there was a knock at the door, and she seemed confused about who it could be. When I opened the door and showed her the flowers, she seemed very uninterested. She said in a disinterested tone, "Oh, thank you." It was clear she did not care about the flowers at all. That was when it became painfully obvious that something was very wrong with her. Sometime after the emotional neglect began, I reached a breaking point and made several calls to the suicide hotline because I could not handle the pain of being emotionally neglected by the woman I love. Talking to someone from the hotline was a relief. It was a rare moment of speaking to someone who actually had empathy. This is when hindsight revealed she lacked the ability to truly empathize. Later that night, one of her friends was in crisis and needed support. She made several insincere affirmations of love for me and said she needed my car to help her friend. She promised to be quick to answer any calls I made for emotional support and even suggested I keep calling the suicide hotline if necessary. My love for her blinded me to how much she was taking advantage of me. That night when she was providing her friend with emotional support, I had another breakdown and called her for support. The call was brief. She shrugged me off. Devastated and overwhelmed, I began the process of making a suicide attempt. As I was getting close to ending my life, I had a sense of self-awareness and rushed to call the suicide hotline again. I knew being honest about my situation could lead to being committed to a mental health facility, but I also knew I needed to do it for my own sake. The police and paramedics arrived, and I was taken to a mental health facility. For some reason, I knew I would not attempt suicide again. Since my check-in was considered voluntary, I was released from the mental health facility a couple of hours later. I called my girlfriend to pick me up since she had my car. She arrived with her friend, took me home, and dropped me off, promising to come for me if I had another mental breakdown. This marked the emergence of a recurring pattern in our relationship. She only supported solutions for my anguish that required no effort on her part. Her sole contribution was glancing at the paperwork from the mental health facility and pointing out the outlined coping mechanisms. She made it clear I could use those if necessary. I came up with multiple solutions which would make it easy for her to provide both her friend and I with emotional support. She rejected every single one of them and was only to accept her own solution on her terms. It became evident that I was expected to struggle alone, as she did not care about my suffering. Shortly after she left, the severity of the situation hit me hard. I called her, asking her to come back. She then made a lame excuse as to why she could not keep her promise. She used my own car to abandon me. I finally got fed up and stood up for myself. I told her I was leaving for a few days and demanded my car back immediately. She panicked and rushed back, promising to spend the rest of the day with me to provide the emotional support I needed. I then set a strict boundary. I would never allow her to treat me as anything less than her number one person again. I made it clear that if she could not honor this, our relationship would be over. Since I truly loved her and wanted our relationship to work, I suggested couples counseling. However, she rejected the idea in an extremely rude manner. I told her, "We need to see a couples counselor because with things as they are, I can't see a future for us." Despite my plea, she refused. That is when I decided to seek out a trauma therapist qualified in EMDR therapy. I chose EMDR because it had helped me recover from an abusive relationship years earlier, one where I experienced physical violence and, on the day it ended, had a busted lip and tasted blood for the first time. EMDR was instrumental in my healing from that past trauma. Due to the severity of my mental health, I decided to continue seeing the same therapist I had been seeing for about a few years as well as the EMDR therapist. Now I am seeing 2 therapists to help me navigate this difficult time. During one of my regularly scheduled sessions with one of my therapists, he said something that shocked me. Her behavior resembled that of a narcissist. After that session, I was really confused. When the topic of narcissistic personality disorder came up, I only thought of classic cases like Narcissism. My girlfriend did not seem like that to me, so I doubted she could be a narcissist. In hindsight, I realize I might have been in denial. Hearing from a mental health professional that my girlfriend might be a narcissist felt like being told I had an incurable disease. I clung to the fact that she was not like that scumbag YouTuber, Onision, struggling to accept this possibility. The emotional neglect persisted despite my repeated attempts to address how deeply hurt I was. No matter how many times I tried to discuss it, it became clear that the neglect was not going to change. What made it even worse was her constant phone use and frequent, carefree laughter. During my mental breakdowns, which sometimes left me paralyzed or vomiting from stress, she would see me suffering, step away, and continue laughing with her phone in hand. At times, if she decided to be nice, she'd say in a cheerful tone, "Don't worry, everything will be all right. I promise." Once, during an early morning breakdown in the bathroom, her response was, "You woke me up at 5 in the morning." This was just another sign of her lack of empathy and disregard for my well-being. I had never felt so confused. Before the emotional neglect began, she was always wanting me close, to the point where I wasn't allowed to be away from her except when she was at work. Now she seemed to want nothing to do with me unless she needed something. This drastic change made no sense to me. I am not religious, but I have always had a spiritual side. After enduring weeks of abuse, I decided to reconnect with that part of myself. I turned to YouTube for guidance and came across a video from a channel called SlightlyBetter, titled, "People with a Spiritual Gift Are Mostly Affected by These 10 Strange Occurrences. Awakening." Although I do not consider myself an empath or someone with a spiritual gift, the video offered me some comfort. However, I was truly surprised was the video description, which contains these exact words. If you're attracted to this video, chances are you might be going through a tough time with someone who is controlling you and manipulative. You might feel lost and confused, unable to trust your own thoughts and feelings. We are here to support you. Free courses to defend yourself against narcissists and help you navigate life. Once again, I was shocked as I encountered another sign suggesting she might be the textbook definition of a narcissist. This left me confused because she did not fit the image of what I thought a narcissist was. I had always associated narcissism with more obvious cases like the grandiose or malignant types. At the time, my understanding of narcissistic personality disorder was limited. I knew enough to recognize 2 common types, grandiose and malignant narcissists. She is not a grandiose narcissist. She does not resemble the stereotypical figures like the YouTuber Onision. And she is not a malignant narcissist. These are the worst of the worst, the kind of people who commit vile atrocities like Ted Bundy, Osama bin Laden, or Hitler. None of these labels seemed to fit her, which only deepened my confusion. It was painfully clear her emotional neglect had taken a severe toll on my mental health. The agony of watching her distance herself from me, except when she needed something, was excruciating. What made it worse was her apathetic behavior toward me. Seeing her constantly on her phone, laughing like someone in the honeymoon phase of a new relationship, only intensified my pain. There were times when her presence became a danger to my well-being. I knew I was on the brink of doing something with potentially dire consequences. Recognizing this, I would leave home for an hour or two, trying to save myself from spiraling further. Each time I did, she would become furious, bombarding my phone with calls and texts. When I returned and explained why I had to leave, her anger was solely focused on my departure, not the reason behind it. It was always about her, never about me. If she had cared even a little, she would have been concerned about why I felt the need to leave. But the only explanation that made sense to me was that she could not tolerate the moments when she had no control over me. Once again, I found myself turning to YouTube for answers. One video caught my eye: 10 Signs of Narcissistic Neglect by Darren F. Magee. As I watched, I was stunned. She matched 9 out of the 10 signs described. The realization overwhelmed me, and I left home in a daze. I sent a text to her mother, letting her know I had decided to end the relationship. Her mom invited me over to talk about it, and when I arrived, the floodgates opened. I broke down, sobbing, because despite everything, I was still deeply in love with her. I showed her mom the video and said, "I don't think your daughter is a narcissist, but so much of what's described in this video fits her behavior perfectly." Her mom agreed that many of the things in the video described her daughter well, but doubted she was a narcissist. Her father, who overheard the conversation, pointed out these behaviors only appeared recently, making the situation even more confusing. In hindsight, I realized that I might have been in denial about the possibility of her being a narcissist. There was something more, something for which we all unaware. There are 2 specific types of narcissism that none of us knew about, both of which would explain everything in a way that would make perfect sense. Her parents had adopted her, and it was clear that she had made their lives, at the very least, difficult. I could sense they were aware of how she truly was, but they did not seem to realize there was a term for her behavior. Her father convinced me not to break up with her right then and there, but instead try an alternative approach for how to get through to his daughter. On the other hand, her mother suggested that I leave for 2 weeks so me and her daughter could evaluate our feelings. About 3.5 months after that dreadful night when I first realized she was neglecting me, I found myself in a session with my EMDR therapist. As I was having a mental breakdown during a session, my therapist gave me the courage to take a step I had been dreading. I sent a message to my mom, telling her I was breaking up with my girlfriend and needed a place to stay until I could save enough money to buy new furniture and move into my own apartment. My mom, sensing the misery in my life, welcomed me back without hesitation. My girlfriend was not home during that therapy session. My therapy appointments were done over video calls. After the session ended, I began packing my belongings. I remember the overwhelming surge of anger I felt as I packed, a fury unlike anything I had ever experienced. But alongside the anger, there was a profound sense of relief. I knew that this horrible chapter of my life was finally coming to an end. As I was finishing up packing, she came back home and immediately grew angry upon realizing I was leaving. The tension in the room was palpable, and I remember saying something that set her off completely. "You do not have control over me." That single sentence caused her to explode with anger, cussing me out and becoming violent. Eventually, after she calmed down, we discussed the suggestion her mom had made, that I would leave for 2 weeks. During this time, she promised to speak with at least one of her therapists about how she could become a better girlfriend. I made it crystal clear that if she did not keep her promise, our relationship would be over. During the 2 weeks apart, I threw myself into researching the cause of her behavior. I became convinced that she is what is known as a fearful avoidant. Her actions seemed to match perfectly, but something still did not sit right. I immersed myself in YouTube and TikTok videos about avoidant behavior, feeling desperate to piece together the puzzle of our relationship. I planned to discuss my findings with her when I returned, hoping for clarity. But then, the day before I was due to come back, I received a message from her. She said it would be best if we went our separate ways. That message hit me like a freight train. In that instant, I slipped into what I later learned was called gray rocking, a technique where you disengage emotionally to protect yourself. I decided not to bring up the fearful avoidant theory, sensing there was still something more about her behavior I had not yet uncovered. If she truly was an avoidant, talking it through would have been worth it. But deep down, I felt that any discussion would be futile. I arranged to go back and collect the rest of my belongings. I found myself consumed by videos on avoidance, drawn into a deep dive that seemed to offer some semblance of understanding. As I read through countless comments, I noticed a troubling pattern. Many people were confusing fearful avoidance with covert narcissists. Unfamiliar with the nuances of covert narcissism, I plunged into research, hoping to unravel the confusion. The revelations were both eye-opening and devastating. Everything seemed to click into place, except for the recent months of the relationship, the very period when this story unfolds. The realization struck me hard. She had never truly been in love with me. I began reflecting on the earliest signs of narcissism I had witnessed, which became apparent before the relationship officially began. She engaged in a type of behavior called love bombing. What many fail to recognize is that narcissists can shift between different types of narcissism. My research revealed that her behavior during our worst times mirrored that of a neglectful narcissist. Basically, she was a covert narcissist during most of the relationship. During the last few months, she switched to being a neglectful narcissist. Now, as I embark on my healing journey from narcissistic abuse, I have found a constructive outlet in creating this video. It serves as a channel for the anger and hurt that have built up inside me. Alongside this healing process, I am seeing tangible improvements. My credit card debt is diminishing, my savings are growing, and most importantly, my mental health is gradually being restored. To anyone who has endured any form of abuse, my heart goes out to you. The pain is excruciating and all-consuming. Many therapists emphasize an important truth. When a narcissist makes you feel worthless, it is a reflection of their own insecurities, not of your worth. Deep down, narcissists often feel like their value is less than nothing. Instead of seeking self-awareness and healing, they choose to drag others down with them. Remember, the narcissist sought you out because you possess qualities they desperately wanted to exploit. You are an immensely valuable person, and their aim was to take advantage of that. Whenever you start feeling worthless, remind yourself of the qualities the narcissist coveted in you. For instance, traits like professional success, culinary skills, unwavering faithfulness, attentive listening, devotion to satisfying your partner sexually, having a car, unconditional love, acceptance of LGBTQ+ family members, and the ability to hold yourself accountable. All of these are qualities that narcissists desperately desire to exploit in a partner. These traits showcase your inherent value and humanity. Narcissists are drawn to these very qualities because they want to possess and exploit them. So never forget, there was something extraordinarily valuable about you that the narcissist wanted to claim as his or her own. Someone suggested sharing my story on YouTube might help others who are going through the same hell I endured. If you have stumbled upon this video, my heart goes out to you. I know that your reality is unbearable, and you might be feeling hopeless, questioning if life is worth continuing. As someone who has sought help in a mental health facility due to suicidal behavior, I want you to know that it is worth it to keep living. Narcissists want to strip away your happiness, viewing you merely as an accessory. If you were to disappear, they would simply replace you with a new source of supply, because to them, you are just a disposable item. But when you escape the clutches of a narcissist and commit to healing, you force them to confront a truth painful to them. You are a human being with real emotions, not just an object. This realization makes them intensely envious of your newfound happiness. They are forced to face their own failure in trying to destroy you. So, by finding genuine happiness again, you not only reclaim your life, but also deliver a powerful blow to the narcissist. Healing from narcissistic abuse is incredibly tough. But trust me, it is worth every effort, as there is one thing I can promise you. Learning how to be genuinely happy again is by far the best method to get revenge on the narcissist.